On one side, in Syria, there's a dictator slaughtering his own people. On the other side, a group that just swore loyalty to Al-Qaeda. So the civil war is a murderer versus a bunch of murderers. So the winner will be a murderer. The civil war just got very, very much more complicated, and we'll try to sort it out in a minute. Now to the bloody battle to overtake Syria. And the complicated situation over there just got a little more complicated when it comes to the question, who are the opposition forces fighting to topple the Syrian leader, Bashar al-Assad? Today, one of the rebel groups officially joined up with a branch of Al-Qaeda. According to an audio tape posted online, or an audio recording, the group pledged its support to Ayman al-Zawahiri. That's the terror group's current leader, who's called for the killing of Americans worldwide. Of course, analysts have long warned that ousting the Syrian regime could give rise to Islamic extremists in the region. But today's announcement, frankly, confirms those fears and could complicate the efforts of the United States and the rest of the West to help the rebels in their fight. Let's bring in Michael O'Hanlon, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and he's live with us there this afternoon. Michael, your sense for how big a deal this is?
Hi, Shepard. Well, it's certainly not good news, although it's also not a huge surprise. This particular part of the Syrian insurgency was known to be one of these extreme jihadist kind of groups with a lot of commitment to martyrdom and suicide bombs and all the rest that we've gotten accustomed to over the last decade. And so I think the real hard question is not whether this affiliation is all that meaningful or significant, but whether time really is playing to our advantage or not. Will this group get stronger among the various Syrian insurgent groups with time if we stay out, or will it get stronger or weaker if we get involved? You know, in other words, how much can we shape the relative role of this group in the opposition? We obviously want to minimize it. To me, that makes the case for the United States getting more assertive earlier, but one can debate that. That's the central question.
More assertive earlier. By many judgments, we might be well past early already. We're 2 years into this thing. I just wonder specifically if you have thoughts on what it is that we might do, how far it is we might go.
Yeah, well, I think what you need to do is set a clock in motion where you start to give weaponry to those insurgent groups that you can vouch for. You try to put fail-safe mechanisms on those weapons so they can't be used over a long period of time. You probably don't want to give your best anti-aircraft weapons to the insurgents out of fear that some of these Al-Qaeda affiliates could get a few. But you can still give things like rocket-propelled grenades and better armor, better communications gear. Most of that we're not doing, with the exception of the non-lethal stuff so far. And then I think it's time to actually start a consultative process among NATO and Arab League countries about if and when we should go to an airstrike option to help the insurgents defeat the regime. I don't want to do that. But if we don't set a clear marker that we will do that if necessary, this thing can keep dragging on, because Assad and the Russians and others can keep telling themselves that time could be their friend rather than their enemy. And I don't think we want them to be encouraged in that opinion.
Where is the Arab League on this?
The Arab League is pretty strongly in favor of the insurgents, though you do get into some complicated sectarian issues. The Arab League, as you know, is primarily Sunni states. The insurgency is primarily Sunni. The Assad regime is primarily Alawite, non-Sunni, a Shia derivative. And so that's much of the logic for why the Arab states don't really tend to like Assad. But also, Assad's killing tens of thousands of their fellow Arabs. And that becomes, at some point, as you point out, this is now 2 years in, that's a pretty compelling argument for a greater and greater number of them. I think, you know, they're already giving more arms than we are, a number of the Arab League states. And I think they'd be prepared to talk about an air campaign of some kind if we at least began that conversation pretty soon.
Does feel like something's got to give. Michael O'Hanlon from the Brookings Institution. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you, Shepard.
All right, right now.